Every fall, my friends and I make it a tradition to hit up the biggest haunted house attraction in town. It's set up in this old, rundown warehouse, and every year they go all out with the scares. Chainsaws, strobe lights, actors jumping out from behind every corner. It's the kind of place that guarantees you'll leave with your heart racing. Last year was no different, or at least, it didn't start out any different. It was me, my girlfriend Rachel, and two of our friends, Greg and Bailey. We bought our tickets online, drove out there on a chilly October night, and waited in the long line with all the other thrill seekers. By the time we got to the entrance, the excitement was high. You could hear the screams from inside the house, the muffled roar of chainsaws, and people running for their lives. "This is gonna be awesome," Greg said, grinning like an idiot. He was always the one who tried to act tough, but I knew he was just as freaked out as the rest of us. We handed our tickets to the guy at the entrance, a tall dude in full costume, dressed as some kind of deranged butcher. He didn't say much, just grunted and motioned for us to go inside. The first few rooms were what you'd expect. Dark hallways, creepy dolls, actors jumping out from behind hidden doors. We laughed and screamed our way through, loving every second of it. Then we got to one of the larger rooms. This one was set up to look like a slaughterhouse, with fake blood everywhere and plastic body parts hanging from the ceiling. There was a single actor in the room, a guy in a grimy butcher's apron holding a bloody cleaver. His face was hidden behind a grotesque mask, and he didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at us as we walked in. "Nice touch," Rachel whispered, gripping my arm. The guy didn't move. He just kept staring. Greg, being Greg, walked up to him, trying to act tough. "Come on, man. Give us your best scare." Still, the guy didn't move. We all exchanged uneasy glances. Usually the actors in these places are all over you, jumping out, screaming, doing whatever it takes to get a reaction. But this guy, he was different. He wasn't doing the usual routine. "Maybe he's new," Bailey said with a nervous laugh. Just as we were about to leave the room, the guy finally moved. He lifted the cleaver in his hand and took a step toward us. Not fast, not like he was jumping out to scare us. He just walked. "All right, buddy, we get it," I said, feeling a bit creeped out. "Good job. We're scared." He didn't stop. He kept walking, slowly closing the distance between us. Rachel tugged on my arm. "Let's just go." We turned to head to the next room, but the door wouldn't open. It was locked. Is this part of the show?" Greg asked, glancing around. That's when the man spoke for the first time. "Where do you think you're going?" His voice was low, almost a growl, and it sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't the usual over-the-top performance. This guy sounded angry. Before we could react, he lunged at us, swinging the cleaver in a wide arc. It missed Greg by inches, slamming into the wooden door instead. We all screamed and backed away, pressing ourselves against the far wall. My heart was pounding in my chest, and for a moment, I thought maybe this was just part of the experience, an extra intense scare. But then I saw the look on Rachel's face. She was terrified, and not in the fun haunted house way. This was real fear. "This isn't part of the attraction," she whispered, her voice trembling. I looked back at the guy, and that's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The cleaver. It wasn't one of those dull fake props they usually use in haunted houses. This one was real. The sharp, glinting edge of the blade caught the dim light, and I realized with a sinking feeling that we were in serious trouble. "Open the door," Bailey screamed, pounding on the locked door. The guy took another step toward us, dragging the cleaver along the floor, the sound of metal scraping against wood making my skin crawl. "You're not leaving," he growled. I don't know what came over me, but in that moment, instinct kicked in. I grabbed one of the plastic body parts hanging from the ceiling, a fake leg, and swung it at the guy. It hit him square in the chest, knocking him off balance for a second. "Run!" I shouted, and we all bolted for the door, desperately trying to force it open. Greg, in a panic, threw himself against the door, and somehow it gave way. We stumbled into the next room, slamming the door behind us. Our hearts were racing, but we didn't stop. We ran through the rest of the haunted house, pushing past the other actors, who seemed oblivious to what had just happened. When we finally made it outside, we found the staff and immediately told them what had happened. They looked confused, insisting that no one was supposed to be wielding real weapons inside. They sent security to check it out, but when they searched the room, the guy was gone. No sign of the butcher, no real cleaver, nothing. We left that night with a sick feeling in our stomachs. Whoever that guy was, he wasn't part of the haunted house. He had snuck in, pretending to be an actor, and for a few minutes, we were just another part of his twisted game. We never went back to that haunted house again. I was staying with my cousin Jacob for a weekend at his family's house in the country. We were close growing up, always finding some kind of mischief to get into, and that weekend was no different. It was late one evening, and while our parents were still outside in the backyard, Jacob suddenly turned to me with that glint in his eye, the one he always got when he had a bad idea. "Hey," he said, leaning in. "There's this abandoned house through the woods, not too far from here. It's supposed to be haunted." I raised an eyebrow. "Haunted?" Jacob nodded. "Yeah, man, it's all run down and creepy as heck. We should go check it out." I wasn't exactly sold on the idea, but the curiosity got to me. After all, what was the harm in looking around an old house? "We can sneak out," Jacob added, already walking toward the window. "Parents won't even notice we're gone." Before I knew it, we were climbing out of Jacob's ground floor bedroom window, slipping into the cool night air. The woods behind his house were thick, but Jacob knew the way, and after about 10 minutes of walking, we saw it, the house. It looked like something out of a horror movie. The place was rotting, the windows shattered, and the porch sagged like it could collapse at any second. Vines crawled up the sides of the house, twisting around the old wooden beams. "There it is," Jacob whispered, grinning. "Let's go inside." The closer we got, the more uneasy I felt, but I followed him up the creaky steps. The door was hanging off its hinges, and we slipped inside, immediately hit with the smell of mold and decay. The place was a wreck. Broken furniture, shattered glass, and the wallpaper was peeling off the walls. "This place is gross," I muttered. "That's what makes it cool," Jacob shot back, shining his flashlight around the room. "Come on, let's check out the upstairs." We were halfway across the room when we heard it, a creaking sound coming from above us. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "What was that?" I whispered, glancing up at the ceiling. Jacob looked up too, but instead of being freaked out, he just grinned. "Maybe it's a ghost." I wasn't so sure. The sound was too clear, too real. But before I could say anything, Jacob started toward the staircase. "Come on, man," he said, already walking up the steps. "We gotta see what's up there." Against my better judgment, I followed him. The stairs groaned under our weight, and the creaking from upstairs grew louder. I told myself it was just the house settling, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. We reached the top of the stairs, and Jacob shone his flashlight down the narrow hallway. The air was thick with dust, and everything felt off. The creaking had stopped, but there was something else now. Breathing. Faint. But there. "Jacob, we should leave," I whispered. But he was already moving toward one of the rooms, pushing the door open. And that's when we saw him. Sitting in the corner of the room, huddled in a filthy blanket, was a man. His clothes were ragged, his hair matted and greasy, and his eyes, wild and wide, locked onto us the second the door opened. He wasn't a ghost. He was real, and he looked furious. Before we could react, the man lunged at us, his arms outstretched, his face twisted in a crazed expression. "Run!" Jacob shouted, and we both bolted back down the stairs, tripping over each other as we scrambled to get out of the house. I don't think I've ever run that fast in my life. We tore through the woods, not daring to look back, until we finally made it to Jacob's house. We crawled back through the window, slamming it shut behind us, our hearts pounding. Neither of us spoke for a while, both of us too freaked out to say anything. Finally, I broke the silence. "What the heck was that?" Jacob shook his head, still trying to catch his breath. "I don't know, but I'm never going back there." We never mentioned the house again after that night. What we saw wasn't supernatural, but somehow that made it worse. The stories we'd heard about the place were just ghost tales. The real danger was the man living there in the shadows, hiding in that decaying, forgotten house. Every October, my friends and I make it a tradition to hit up the biggest haunted house attraction in the city. This year, it was supposed to be the scariest one yet. So, of course, Paisley, Vanessa, and I were all over it. The haunted house was on the outskirts of town, tucked away in an old industrial area, which only added to the creepy factor. The perfect setting for a night of scares. We drove out there in Vanessa's car, excited and ready for the night. When we got close to the entrance, the parking lot was packed. We circled the block a few times until Vanessa spotted an open space right in front of an old building. It looked perfect, close enough to the entrance, but far enough from the crowd. We didn't even think twice before parking. "Let's do this," Paisley said, hopping out of the car, already hyped up. We didn't think about where we'd parked. Honestly, we were too focused on the haunted house itself. We grabbed our tickets and headed inside, ready for a night of fun. The haunted house was everything we expected. Dark, loud, and full of jump scares. Actors with chainsaws, creepy clowns, the whole 9 yards. We screamed our heads off, laughing every time one of us got spooked. By the time we made it out the other side, we were breathless from both terror and excitement. "That was insane," Vanessa laughed, wiping away a tear. "Worth every second." But the moment we walked back to where we had parked, all that excitement vanished. "Wait, where's the car?" I asked, stopping dead in my tracks. We stood there, staring at the empty space where Vanessa's car had been. At first, I thought maybe we were just in the wrong spot. But no, this was definitely where we had parked. "You've got to be kidding me," Paisley muttered, walking up to the curb. Vanessa's face fell. No. It was right here. I looked around and spotted a faded yellow fire hydrant, partially hidden by the overgrown bushes nearby. My stomach dropped. We hadn't even noticed it when we parked. "I think they towed us," I said, pointing to the hydrant. Vanessa groaned, pulling out her phone. Of course, just our luck. After a few minutes of phone calls and some quick Googling, we confirmed it. The car had been towed to an impound lot across town. Great. Well, how are we supposed to get there? Paisley asked, looking around at the nearly empty streets. The haunted house was still buzzing with activity, but the area around us was pretty much dead. I'll call an Uber, I offered, already pulling up the app. It says, it'll be here in about 10 minutes. We huddled together on the sidewalk, trying to stay warm as we waited. It was a chilly night, and we were definitely not dressed for standing around in the cold. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows down the street. Most of the people were still inside the haunted house, and it felt like we were the only ones out there. After a few minutes, a group of guys came around the corner. There were 4 of them, all wearing hoodies, walking slowly in our direction. At first, I didn't think much of it, but as they got closer, I could feel Paisley tense up beside me. "Hey, you girls need a ride?" one of them called out, a smirk on his face. I shot a quick glance at Vanessa and Paisley. The guys were getting closer, and I didn't like the way they were looking at us. "No, we're good. Thanks," Vanessa said, keeping her voice calm but firm. The guys didn't stop. They kept walking toward us, spreading out a little as they got closer, like they were trying to surround us. One of them, the tallest, stepped right up to me. "Come on, don't be like that," he said, his voice low. "We'll take care of you." My heart started pounding. I glanced at my phone. Still no sign of the Uber. I could feel my stomach twisting in knots as the guy got closer, way too close for comfort. "We're fine," Paisley said, stepping forward slightly, trying to block his path. "Our ride's almost here." The guy's smirk faded. "You sure about that? Looks like you're stuck." I could feel the tension rising. One of the other guys started circling behind us, his eyes darting between us like we were prey. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We don't need help. Just leave us alone." The tall guy's smile disappeared completely. "You don't need help, huh?" I didn't know what to say. We were all frozen, and I didn't want to escalate things, but I could tell Paisley and Vanessa were just as freaked out as I was. Just then, the Uber pulled up to the curb, and I've never been more relieved in my life. I grabbed Paisley and Vanessa by the arms. "Let's go," I said, practically shoving them toward the car. We scrambled into the back seat, slamming the doors shut behind us. I glanced back at the guys. They were just standing there, watching us through the windows, looking pissed that we'd gotten away. "Everything okay?" the driver asked, looking at us through the rearview mirror. "Yeah," Vanessa said, still catching her breath. "Just drive, please." The Uber sped off, and I watched as the guys disappeared in the distance. My heart was still racing, and I didn't relax until we were well away from the haunted house. "That was way too close," Paisley muttered, rubbing her arms. "Never parking in front of a fire hydrant again," Vanessa added, shaking her head. We didn't say much else for the rest of the ride, but the whole night kept playing over and over in my head. We had come for a night of fun, but the real scare hadn't been inside the haunted house. It had been waiting for us outside. Thanks so much for listening to Nightmare Narratives. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be reminded when we post a new video every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central Time. If you have a story you'd like to hear read on the channel, email it to us at officialnightmarenarratives@gmail.com, and you might just hear your story featured in a future episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.